for science, for innovation, a lot of which goes on here. And I want, as I said, I want to champion the union, to answer your question directly, by being not only Prime Minister, First Lord of the Treasury, Minister for the Civil Service, but also Minister for the Union. I would like to have there will be a special unit in number 10 to make sure that every policy is sense and stress tested for the benefits that it will bring to the union. And I want to make it absolutely clear that under no circumstances, whatever happens, will I allow the EU or anyone else to create any kind of division down the Irish Sea or to attenuate our union. And that is why I so bitterly opposed the withdrawal agreement, you may recall. And that's why the best way forward for our country, and that's why I resigned over Chequers, you may recall, because it's a terrible moral blackmail it puts on the UK government. You can't have that. You can't have that approach. The way to protect the union is to come out of the EU whole and entire in the way that I'm recommending, solve the border issues where they belong logically in the context of the FTA that we're going to do. And I think once they recognise in Brussels that they have a different leader in the UK and a totally different approach to the negotiations, I think actually they're going to be rather relieved, because for the last 3 years they've faced a lot of indecision, a lot of confusion about what the UK really wants, and now's the time to get it right.
You were in the cabinet for the first 2 years of that indecision. You held one of the senior offices of state, and yet you're almost saying, well, nothing to do with me, Gov.
Well, if you remember, I spent a lot of the time trying to wrench the steering wheel back in the direction of common sense. And we had a speech at Lancaster House in the beginning of 2017 by the PM, which almost got us back on the right track. And then it was a very, very tough fight up to Chequers in the middle of 2018, when it became obvious, finally, that we were going in completely the wrong direction. And I resigned on principle and made my argument, and I think we're going to win. And we will do an exit from the EU, which keeps our union, but allows the whole UK to take advantage of Brexit.
Just one quick follow-up on what the gentleman said there. The papers, or the Telegraph reported this morning that you want to restructure government to abolish Secretary of State for Northern Ireland.
Actually, it didn't say that. What the Telegraph said, that I was being urged to do that. No one took the trouble to urge me in person before telling the Telegraph that they were urging me to do it. So whatever urgings were taking place, they were not directed personally at me. There will be a Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. There certainly will. I hesitate to dissent from anything that the Telegraph ever says, but I wasn't aware of being urged in any such direction.
Right. There was a gentleman there, and then we'll have the lady down the front.
Hi, Boris. Philip Black. I'm just wondering, if you aren't out of the EU on the 31st of October, what are your plans? Are you going to have a general election, or are you going to stand down, or, what is the backup plan?
But what is this defeatism? This is what they keep hearing in Brussels, and they keep thinking these guys aren't serious. The law at the moment says that the UK must come out of the EU on October the 31st unless the Prime Minister of the UK, unless the Government of the UK asks for another extension. Why would we want an extension? Look, hands up, who wants an extension? Right, okay, there's a couple of people there at the back. Okay, all right, okay, fair enough. A couple of people want an extension. I think the overwhelming majority of our party wants to get out on October the 31st, and that is what we're going to do. And we're going to get out in the way that I've described. I think it's the most sensible approach. It will enable us to get on, do a great free trade deal, and take advantage of Brexit. And at the moment, I think any more can kicking simply plays into the hands of our opponents. And although it is true that Jeremy Corbyn is a very, very feeble leader, and there's a big difference between now and when I first came to speak to Northern Irish Conservatives, I think we were then facing Tony Blair. who was coming up, glistering-toothed, plausible, crowding all over the centre ground. But that's not the case with Corbyn. Corbyn is far left and deeply implausible in his economic policies, and in the recent council elections in May, he managed to go backwards. He's so incompetent. He lost seats. That didn't happen with Blair. That didn't happen with Blair.
But you can't guarantee that Parliament won't be successful in amending the law to stop you from leaving on October the 31st, can you?
Well, of course, what I believe is that parliamentarians will want to take their responsibilities very seriously and will understand, as I say, that we are staring down the barrel. And our country faces a choice now. Our politicians face a choice. They can continue to hemorrhage trust. They can continue to be seen as willing to undermine democracy. We can lose more votes to the Brexit Party and to the Liberal Democrats, or we can take our responsibilities seriously and in a mature way and get it over the line. And I think that's what MPs are going to do. And look at the vote that happened a couple of weeks ago about whether to rule out no deal. Actually, they didn't. I think people are increasingly waking up to the fact that this is existential for the Tory party, and it's probably also existential for Labour as well. If they, you know, they will also lose huge amounts of support unless they get this done.
So I've got Dominic Grieve for an hour on my radio show tonight. What should I ask him?
Well, I think you should ask him whether he would. What would he really prefer? What would he really prefer? Would he prefer to come out of the EU in the way that the British people were promised on October the 31st? Would he prefer to be able to get on and do all sorts of fantastic conservative things, wonderful one nation, progressive, modern conservative policies, investing in infrastructure, investing in education, in healthcare, and all the things that we care about, as well as championing the private sector? Or would he rather unnecessarily frustrate Brexit, cause deepening anger and disillusionment amongst the voters, and pave the way eventually for a Corbyn government? What does he want? The chance to build a new partnership with our European friends based on free trade and all the things we're going to do together, or a Corbyn government? That's the choice.
Lady down there, followed by gentleman there.
Lynn Anderson, East Belfast. Following on from that, I was going to ask a question about party unity. And if you became Prime Minister, what would you actually do about some of your Conservative MP colleagues who seem to have been putting personal preference above the democratic result of the referendum, and actually doing all they can, it seems to me, to undermine and sabotage trying to get Brexit through?
I would love them up. I would, thank you. I don't think you were applauding my answer. You were applauding the question. I would give them as much understanding and love as I possibly could, and try to bring everybody together, because I really think this is existential, folks. We either do this or we're doomed, and we got to get this thing done. And that applies to Dominic. It applies to, you know, I was out campaigning this morning with yesterday morning with Bob Neal, who some of you may know, who takes a very different view from me, but he understands the need to get this thing over the line. So I think we need a mood of determination and unity. And I would just remind you that before you today, as the candidate with more than half the parliamentary party already behind me, and many more now signing up. So I'm very pleased by that outcome, and I have dozens of Remainers, dozens of Leavers already flocking to our standards. So I'm very confident and very excited.
Okay, gentleman there, and then we'll go over there.
Thanks very much for taking the question. So Queen's University Conservative Society, Rowan Wise, I'm the chair. I want to ask Boris, he talks a lot about the moderate progressive policies of the current Conservative government, on which I wholly agree. How does he think that fits with him going and talking to the DUP? Does that not send the right signals when the DUP want Northern Ireland to be treated differently in terms of social policy to the rest of the UK?
Well, look, there's a reason I'm a conservative, and that's because I believe in our policies. We should be very proud of our record in delivering on equalities, and I believe that we've done some great things for society in the whole of the UK, and we should stick at that. And I've said what I've said about the DUP, which is that actually I think that they have been indispensable by delivering that agreement on confidence and supply in preventing our country being governed by Jeremy Corbyn and the Labour Party, and that's the choice we face.
Do you get frustrated that you are painted by your opponents, I don't mean Jeremy Hunt, but in the media on the left of politics, as some sort of right-wing populist? Whereas actually, if you look at your record on particularly social issues, you're about as liberal as you can get.
Well, I know that people think I know. I don't know where it all comes from. It's complete hysteria, but there you go. People will say all sorts of extraordinary things, and you just have to keep trying to correct them. I was, there's I tell you what, it's all. I remember before I became mayor in 2008, there were a whole bunch of lefties who promised faithfully to leave the city or the country if I was elected. And the Guardian ran a whole supplement about how awful I was and the most bigoted, xenophobic person that had ever stood for high office anywhere in the UK. And at the end of 8 years, most of them were working for me, actually, one was certainly supporting me. And I think I had 60% support more at the end than when I came in. But I remain a proud, free market, low tax conservative. I just happen to think that our country does better when we send out a signal to the world that we're inclusive and tolerant and generous in our approach to other people, and that is one of the reasons why the UK economy is so massively successful.
Right, gentleman.
Thanks very much. Having moved here from Scotland,
Malcolm, I was delighted to see you
Malcolm
there.
Scott.
Yes.
We did a great trip up to the Highlands.
I remember.
Quite a few years ago. With hearing your comments about the bridge, which was very positive, because
I'd love it. But
massively pro the bridge.
Do a lot of infrastructure in around Stranraer and all that.
Yeah, and what needs to be done, which is political will and local will. How would you view the same political will and local will if there was a promotion of a financial tax-free zone in Belfast?
Well, that's the sort of thing we can do, but only once we leave the EU. Malcolm, thank you very much for your question. We could do free ports. It would be a massive boost to this economy, but only once we come out. And I want to have about 6 of them, by the way. We should definitely be doing free ports and tax-free zones. They have delivered around the world. Well, I think there are about 130 countries that have them. We don't, because of our membership of the EU, and there are plainly areas that would benefit from them.
Why 6, and where would they be?
I'm not going to tell you where they're going.
I tried.
They're going to be all over the place.
I tried.
Particularly in Northern Ireland.
Right, lady there. Wait for the microphone.
Good afternoon, Leslie McGarrity, North Down. I wanted to ask you, Boris, about the national crisis that is facing us all, which is social care. And I'm a provider of social care in Northern Ireland, and I have seen over the last number of years the cuts and the difficulties there are in both staffing, recruiting and sustaining social care. And we saw how Theresa May fell on the sword of that on the dementia tax, and how Labour was so easily able to beat her with it at the last election. What would your proposals be to sustain and establish social care in the United Kingdom?
You are so right. I mean, it's fascinating. Doing election campaigns like this is so valuable because you really start to understand what's top of people's minds. This is number one. And we've got to sort it out because it affects every family in the land. It affects my family, it affects everybody's family. People are thinking, how on earth am I going to pay for the cost of care over what could be a huge period of time running into tens, hundreds of thousands of pounds? Where's that money coming from? And all I can say is we need to approach, and there, of course we put another 3.9 billion, I think, into social care as a government, but we've got to recognise in the long term we need to sort it out. And there are no quick fixes or easy answers. We need to bring everybody together to try to take the politics out of it, because as you rightly pointed out, it became very difficult at the last election. The two principles should be that nobody should face eviction from their home to pay for the cost of their social care. And everybody should be entitled to stay in their home. And number two, everybody should be entitled to dignity and security in their old age. But we need to bring the parties together to sort this out across our country.
Ladies and gentlemen, Boris Johnson.
Is that it?
That's it.
Thank you very much for coming.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that's aided you in your decision-making process. If you haven't had enough politics today, do listen to me, 7 p.m, LBC, with Dominic Grieve tonight. Thank you.